It's an interesting chair. Small.
Well, I would...
Safety first. I got to get my base. We're good.
I would introduce you, but you were just on stage.
Right.
So, and I know you may have talked about this a little bit in your presentation, but I really want to kind of address resiliency, renewables, and innovation in our chat today.
Right.
So, starting off, what has your experience with natural disasters, particularly the hurricane, kind of taught you about resiliency?
Well, the natural disasters it's now part of the DNA. Katrina was a watermark because of its intensity, its impact. For us, there were a number of lessons learned, and we've talked about them, we've written about them, but one is the planning perspective. You hope for the best, you plan for the worst, and somewhere in the middle you find your reality. From our vantage point, I think the planning perspective, the drilling around being responsive to the intense storm has produced benefits. The other side of it is, again, expanding the conversation beyond the utility, where we know that electricity powers life as part of our vision and mission statement, but we also know it as the driver to our community's GDP. And so encouraging our stakeholders, our customers in particular, across all customer segments, to be part of the conversation, including government and the policy perspective.
So would you say kind of that new focus on partnerships was kind of part of the long-term strategy for resiliency? How did that experience really shape that long-term strategy?
Well, for us, resiliency plays itself out in a capital plan. Any conversation we have around resiliency and in the utility space, resiliency tends to mean more fortified assets along the traditional value chain. But for us, resiliency is a community conversation. And so it's no longer solely resiliency through the lens of what aspect or component of our capital plan must be around hardening our system. Yes, there's a lot that's still a part of that. It goes back to my prior conversation around the fact that notwithstanding technological advancement closer to where the customer's sited, the backbone of our system still has to be resilient because it's going to continue to play a significant role in enabling the cool stuff, the shiny toys or objects that I heard referenced as I was walking up. It enables the deployment of those things. And so for us, it's a community conversation. That's what's different. We can elevate our substations in anticipation to become more adaptive and resilient to flooding. But if our customers aren't doing the same thing after a storm passes, we can serve load. We've got no load because our customers can't take service. GDP has come to a halt. Business has been interrupted. Lives have been interrupted. That's why I'm iterating that it is a community conversation, and that's different from a decade and beyond ago, when disruption was defined through the lens of when can the power company turn the power back on. Expectations are radically different now. Technology is a large region for it.
And let's kind of get into that. Innovation has really influenced grid modernization and resiliency. So how has innovation played a role in your resiliency strategy? You mentioned that the community aspect, but technology plays a significant role as well.
Yeah, and innovation is a buzzword, but innovation is not new. If any of you, as children, you might have played jump rope. In urban settings, there's this thing called double dutch, and it's two ropes that are swinging at the same time, and the objective for you is when is the right time for you to jump in with your partner without disrupting the flow of the jump rope. That's how I think about innovation from a utility perspective, because again, for most of that century that I've just described, there are terms that we've become familiar with: deemed delivered, used and useful, known and measurable. Those are all proxies for prudency, for capital deployment, for investments, for customers. Utilities traditionally have not been rewarded, again, for jumping into that jump rope too early. We can't be too early. We can't be too late. The driver for us is not always regulatory approval. That's after the fact, prudency. The driver for us is meeting customer expectations where they are, which is why I talk about that inflection point where our customers' desires, the Maslow framework, and technology. We know that there's technology available, but if it's not widely available, if it's not affordable for customers, if it doesn't create value in outcomes that matter to them, then we have to be careful about how quickly we're bringing them into first-gen technology. It might be cool for a moment, but the moment that the customers don't see it providing sustainable value, it winds up being a risky proposition. And so for us, it's a timing issue. How do we make the investment on a scale basis in a way that allows us to create value for customers that's sustainable, not first-gen technology per se, but also not participating in that first generation. You have utility companies that are now engaged in venture capital plays, because not only are we looking at the next IoT, the next Internet of Things, we also know that we can't be too far behind, because our customers are expecting us, no matter how bad the incumbent utility gets beat up from time to time in the regulatory perspective, there's an expectation that we're there when it counts. We've got to be just in time.
So how does your organization kind of go evaluate the effectiveness of the communication and making sure that you are giving your customers what they want? I think a lot of the times utilities can be like, well, we tried this, we're not quite sure if it worked. How do you kind of track that and evaluate it?
You think about how does a customer value, what does a customer value? And that's where, again, the Maslow's hierarchy kind of frames up, because we are now far more versed in terms like ethnography, where we're going out and asking customers, not, how are we doing on reliability and service or price, but what were you doing with the electricity that was so important to you that when the lights went out, your life was disrupted? And so we're trying to figure out where the customer is on his or her or its journey up Maslow's hierarchy, and asking the question that I made reference to earlier this morning: what solution or set of solutions best puts you in a position to do that? That's taking time and putting resources in a conversation that historically you were not, as a utility, incented to do, because the benefits of you optimizing that bulk electric system, those benefits were deemed delivered. We've talked for a century in terms of SAIDI and SAFE. We jokingly call it for engineers by engineers. But at the end of the day, customers don't care about SAIDI and SAFE, although it's a benchmark. It has been a benchmark for us. Customers are measuring their outcomes. And so it's a different focal point for how we think about value creation when we're making a business case for a specific technology. Again, agnostic as to the type of technology, not agnostic as to the outcomes the technology produces, because we're measuring ourselves along those customer outcomes, not solely by the inputs that have defined a specific fuel source, a specific technological delivery system to a customer, or a transmission setup for an industrial customer, a distribution setup. There is no singular technology play for us. But the tough part about asking the customers what they want and then getting feedback around what their objective is, that data, and again, that's data just like data from AMS or your operating system. What do you do with it in a way that's meaningful? And so the utility industry is no different than any other industry that's evolving and transforming, and in response to evolving customer demands, but also in response to evolving capabilities now to deliver and delight customers differently than we have in the past. And it's exciting because it's different. It's scary because it's different. It's meaningful, yet it's different. And the conversations in the boardroom with customers and the regulatory proceedings within the investment community is all around managing the uncertainty. But I believe where Entergy is thinking about it in the right way, we're thinking about it through the lens of customer outcomes, not being blinded by fidelity to a specific asset. And so it's a different mindset or different approach.
So let's talk about innovation kind of from the internal perspective.
Yeah.
One thing that is really interesting in these changing business models is the ability to get different ideas from different areas of your organization, particularly when it comes to storm response. You have guys on the ground who have ideas.
And gals.
Guys and gals on the ground who have ideas about how to do things better, but sometimes they can get stifled because they're low in the organization. How has Entergy kind of helped streamline innovation across all business areas?
Great question. And I know one of our colleagues was here either early or today or yesterday talking about our innovation efforts. You know, we have an employee-driven excellence program. We call it EDE. It's essentially a bottoms-up approach to ideas, vetting ideas. And those ideas span from process improvement, cost reduction. Some of those ideas actually evolve into potential business offerings. In years past, the thought of employee-driven excellence or innovation was solely an internal process, end-to-end process improvement for the purpose of lowering costs. And obviously that is going to remain a major objective of our internal idea engine. What's different for Entergy now is that we've evolved beyond the end-to-end processes, whether they be internal or external customer facing. We now have, because of the work we've done over the last 4 years or so in the venture ideation and the incubation space, we're evolving beyond the internal into sort of the external. We have an internal incubation center that we use to vet ideas through from the establishment of the idea to the minimum viable product into the alpha and beta testing and determining whether or not that idea, again, agnostic as to where the idea came from. The strength of the idea is in the strength of the idea, not in its origin. And determining whether or not the idea deserves or is earned either implementation, if it's in process, or in potential commercialization. And that's different from the traditional paradigm where, again, we have not been incented to play in the innovation space. We had to wait until the technology was at its nth of a kind. Thus, it would pass the hurdle of known, measurable, used, useful. Thus, we could deem it delivered and have it part of the regulatory regime. And we're also involving our regulatory staff, the regulators, our legislators, our customer base, around the need to constantly evolve and to use the term, again, to innovate, to have them as part of the process. Again, we're still in the business of deploying capital in a predictable way to provide services and value to customers. But doing so is requiring us to put capital at work and at risk to help in the iteration process. Traditionally, our industry, research and development was traditionally limited to EPRI and the Electric Power Research Institute. And they still perform a very important role for our industry. But as we have known intuitively, EPRI represents the highest common denominator across the companies that support and a benefit from the value that EPRI provides. But we all are in a competitive space where we're competing not always against each other, but we're competing against expectations of customers. and the changing capabilities of technology. And again, I referenced earlier, the marginal rate of substitution. Technology is, our customers are adopting technologies at a rate that's not always predictable. And our objective, again, not too early, not too late, but that double Dutch, getting in right on time. That's the fun part of my job, the job of our senior leadership team. That's the challenge that the board and investors and regulators and customers and the employees, that's the challenge that they present to us, and it's why I get excited to go to work every day. Because I know that I am experiencing, much like what I experienced during Katrina, I knew I was living in an historical event in real time. It's sort of like knowing you're in a movie, but you're writing it at the same time. It's a surreal experience. That's how I feel in my senior leadership role. I know that we're in the midst of technological transformation because of the rate of advancement of technology. I don't know how the movie ends, which is why I think the right approach is to continue to ask the right questions and not fall into the trap that my friends in Australia and other parts of the US and the world, that we've experienced the downside of jumping head first into the shiny object. Asking the right questions, focusing on customer outcomes, I think keeps us grounded as technology constantly gets supplanted by the next gen of technology.
So before we get into customers and kind of the technologies that they are adopting that are really influencing change, I did want to ask one more follow-up question, because I think that we talk a lot about customer empowerment, but workforce empowerment is just as important. Yeah. And I would imagine that having programs like this makes sure employees feel like they are contributing outside of other areas that they traditionally did. Are you seeing that it's boosting, is there an effect on employee morale and collaboration?
It's a double-edged sword until we do a better job of educating our employees around how we think about value creation. The reason why I say double-edged sword, when we talk about efficiency, and this is, it could be Entergy, it could be Duke, it could be PG&E, it could be fill in the blank, utility company. Efficiency plays itself out mathematically in the reduction of man or woman hours. Employees, whenever we're talking about efficiency gains, what's the first thing that the employees ask? Before we get into a morale conversation, hey, we just embraced my unique idea, what's the first question that the employee is going to ask? Again, go back to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy. How is this going to affect me? How does this affect me in my journey up my Maslow's hierarchy? And the reason why I say it's a double-edged sword, going to employees and employees seeing their idea go through a life cycle has a profound impact on our desire to have an open and trusting environment. That's what diversity, inclusion, and belonging is all about, removing the obstacles from your employees' ability to apply their trade and to be free to contribute and produce, for all the stakeholders. I'm seeing and have seen the friction. We talk about customer frictions and solving customer pain points. I'm seeing in real time our employees' friction around what technology ultimately means. I remember signing off on the deployment of AMI meters as an example. And we think about the advanced metering infrastructure as a gateway to a new set of ways to delight customers, to have two-way visibility around the operation of our grid and interaction with customers and devices and things. But the moment we deployed the AMI meters, think about Maslow's hierarchy for those meter services personnel. What impact do you think the notion of technological advancement had on their climb and their fear that technology is disrupting their livelihood. And going back again to that double Dutch analogy, where do we come in as Entergy, as the employer, in trying to retrain and repurpose? Ian, I think about the linemen at Ergon who the Boilermakers or whatever they were, who were retrained to fly drones. Fascinating, forward thinking. At what point do we retrain the employees who used to be in meter services to more value accretive roles and functions? But I also know I have the objective commercially of lowering my cost of service, because all of the capital that we're deploying to do the cool stuff to create value for customers, I also have to do it in a way that keeps the services affordable, which means my production, my deployment of capital has to be productive such that the deployment of capital is designed to reduce O&M. And oh, by the way, if, fill in the blank, 70, 80% of a service company's non-fuel related O&M is tied to people, then we're in a constant tension between efficiency and the impact that technological advancement and the efficiency that comes with it has on jobs. And so to your point about workforce development, we're spending time training the workforce of tomorrow for the roles that don't exist yet. The Generation X, Ys, millennials, I've lost count now that I'm officially 50, thinking about what are the skills we're going to have tomorrow. But folks, we have thousands of employees who've spent the last 20, 30, 40 years of their life mastering the tasks that had been relevant for the last 3 decades. And we've been on a constant collision course of having to retrain and repurpose enough of them to help us bridge the gap, knowing that efficiency gains means, with that O&M productive capital dynamic, we get to do more because of technology with less. That is not a dirty little secret. It's not. It is a very real, it's a reality of the objective of delighting customers, which means that price and value component for customers is a major aspect of how we create and sustain value for those 4 stakeholders. It's also how we are able to have timely and efficient recovery mechanisms by delighting customers and keeping our prices affordable. It's how we're able to attract capital from investors because they know we're being prudent with the capital that we're deploying that delights customers in a way that allows us to earn a fair rate of return for them, which is why our objective has to remain creating sustainable value for all 4 stakeholders along the way: our customers, our employees, our owners, and the communities we serve. And so every decision we make has to be vetted through the lens of how does it impact and create sustainable, not just near term, but sustainable value across that stakeholder scene. And the EDE process has been phenomenal for the morale of the employees, but I know and I see that real employee friction because of their concerns about, again, how does this affect me?
So let's close it out talking about the customer. You mentioned a few times some of these technologies that are creating change. What are some of these primary technologies that you're seeing influence Entergy, especially when it comes to customer preferences and adoption of certain technologies?
Yeah, it is the Internet of Things, and that's not just a buzzword, it's a reality. Our customers, we think about our customers as regional, having regional identities. The truth of the matter is, when Papa John's has its pizza app, it doesn't have a different app for the folks in the South as it does in the Midwest, as it does for folks in the Northeast United States or a different part of the country, or the world for that matter. There's an expectation that customers want the ability to engage, to disengage, to solve technical issues, to be delighted through the use of a device. Because their outcomes, what they were doing while they were ordering a pizza, before they ordered a pizza, and after they digested and burped up that pizza with the beer, is really what was important to them. They didn't want their lives interrupted by their desire to order a pizza. The ability to solve their problems with the thumb is what's creating the expectations. The Entergys of the world and other utility companies and service providers, we're all competing against the expectations that come from the ease of use, from the Internet of Things. And so the challenge for us is to bend that curve and to turn that monolithic utility company with a speed that matches the pizza companies, making it easy, make those transactions easy and on the customer's terms, in a language and a method that matters to them, based on their outcomes, not our traditional utility assets as inputs.
It's funny that you bring up this pizza analogy. I was actually talking about this. I was actually talking about this with a few of my colleagues, and also it's the idea of giving customers their different types of preferences. You may have a customer who likes pineapple pizza. You may have a customer who likes jalapenos on their pizza, but you also may have a customer who likes jalapeno pizza, and you provide them the opportunity to have that easy experience to get the outcome that they want.
You know, we're using a term in utility customer parlance that's been foreign, and it's the Net Promoter Score. The NPS is all about loyalty. A customer is not going to buy your products and services unless they're promoters. And in the promoter space, customization, you know, again, Maslow, how does this affect me, is why I talk about focusing on customer outcomes as opposed to inputs. There's this monolithic thought driven by engineers, lawyers, and accountants that has dominated our utility space. But incorporating the Maslow's hierarchy, you know, forces the heavy engineering, you know, regulatory accounting space to deal with the psychology of what drives customer behavior. And the utility business, again, is not competing. We're not competing against each other as utility companies. We're competing against an evolving customer expectation that is being enabled by technology. And it's exciting, it's scary, but I wake up, I go to bed at night, and people ask me, how do you sleep? I say, I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 15 minutes crying. So it's rough out there, but I enjoy what I do because I know we really do power lives, and it's exciting to be a part of this. So I think we're getting a signal that my time is up. I was going to answer any questions from the audience, but you know, I'll honor the time and I'll take your lead.
Yeah, we're going to close it out. Rod, you'll be around. Nope, no.
I'll be around for a few moments.
Okay.
Did I mention I was hungry?
He's hungry. All right. Well, please join me in thanking Rod for sitting down with us again.
Appreciate it. Well done.
Thank you.
Nice job, Darren.